Let's get to our interview. Today, I am talking with Dalton George. He is the mayor pro tem of the town of Boone, North Carolina. Folks, you'll recall 7 months ago, Hurricane Helene absolutely devastated western North Carolina beyond comprehension. And the recovery since then is still ongoing. It will be ongoing for I don't even know how long. Dalton has been there since day one, even before day one. He has been on the ground helping with recovery. He has been working with first responders, working with mutual aid, working with neighbors, with people who have been impacted, whose lives have been upended and destroyed, and has been a tireless advocate for getting the resources that people need and getting it quickly and efficiently. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk with him about how the recovery is going, what has worked, what hasn't worked, sifting through the misinformation and disinformation being peddled by politicians and bad actors and all of the like. And I really just wanted to sit down with somebody who has been knowledgeable of what's been happening in the area, in the region since Hurricane Helene, and just talk with somebody who actually knows what the hell is going on and be able to speak credibly about it. And Dalton is the right person and was the right person. And I really enjoyed our conversation. And I think it's been just incredibly informative. And I know that you all will really appreciate it too. This interview happened about a month ago. So it's a little dated, but I don't think that the information is very dated at all. So I think it's still very much fresh and relevant, and so I don't think that'll be a problem. Dalton's a really great guy. I really enjoyed talking with him, and I think that you all will really enjoy the conversation. So give it a listen. Let me know your thoughts, and be thinking about the people in Western North Carolina and everywhere else that's been affected by Hurricane Helene, because they are still in an ongoing recovery and will be for quite some time. I saw that you moved to Boone for college. Where are you from originally?
So I'm from this little town called Midway, North Carolina. Originally, it's about an hour and a half from Boone. But my family kind of upbringing was interesting. This family took me in part of the time. Grew up really working class, single parent family, and they split their time. There and then in Allegheny County, which is a neighboring county to Watauga, up here in the northwest corner of North Carolina. So bounced around a bit, but Midway is where I went to high school. So that's what I claim as the proper hometown.
Cool, cool. And I'm guessing you really love Boone from going there, and you kind of fell in love with the place and wanted to stay. Was that sort of how it all worked out?
Yeah, partly. I mean, the really interesting thing was I chose Boone just because it reminded me of those days I'd spent in Allegheny County, and that had always felt like this really comforting. It felt like the right place for me in so many ways. But I got up here and I started organizing around tenants' rights, helping folks with evictions and bad living conditions, things like that. And I kind of had this realization as I was ending my 4 years at Appalachian State. It was like so many people started all kinds of fights here, and then they ended up moving for whatever reason, trying to make this place a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I want to stay and fight for this place. I love this place enough. And at the time, I was landscaping. The employment prospects were not great,
Yeah.
but I decided, hey, the work's not done. Folks are still struggling. There's still a lot to do with the rental market here, and stayed and organized around that. And actually, some of the people that I was working to help stop evictions or whatever, that's who was encouraging me to run for office originally. So that's kind of how I got into this mess.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I mean, that's a good point. There are a lot of really motivated people, especially in college towns, but a lot of them do end up moving after, 4 years or however long. So that's really cool that you decided to stay. Yeah, talk to me about running for office real quick. You serve as mayor pro tem. What is that? What is that position specifically?
Yeah, so I'm vice mayor. When the mayor's away, I'm the mayor, which is kind of funny. But I ran for town council just like my or four colleagues on council. So there's five council members, including me, and then the mayor. And when we're all elected, the council then appoints a mayor pro tem, so kind of like a leader of the Senate or something, or whatever you want to call it. And so kind of the person they want representing that legislative process, and they appointed me, which I was really honored by. Obviously, I'm the youngest by a good chunk, but that was after 2 years just serving as a council member. So I felt like kind of earned my place, and they wanted to give me that recognition. So I've been mayor pro tem for a little bit over a year now.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. I love when like younger people are in public office because number one, it's a rare thing, and two, it's just important to have younger people's views and perspectives represented because it's just so we're so underrepresented. I mean, look at the average age of Congress; it's like 70 something, which is ridiculous. Um, well, I'd love to get to talking about Hurricane Helene because there's so much to cover, but just like in general, I mean, talk about that whole period of time. I mean, from was it something where the community? I mean, you're a community leader, so was it something where you all were anticipating it being this bad, or were you think it was going to be bad and then it was even worse? Like, were you caught completely off guard? What was the situation like for you all?
Yeah, I think a lot of people in Western North Carolina and really across the region had no idea that it would be to the scale that it was. Now, we knew that we were going to get a lot of rain and we knew that there was going to be some impact. The weeks leading into the hurricane, our public works crew, they were out there clearing out culverts, doing pre work, making sure that any debris that could contribute to increased flooding was dealt with. And so we were doing a lot of pre work in anticipation, but the scale of it, right? Losing phone service, losing internet, losing power to the degree that we did, roadways, things like that. I mean, that was something I don't think anybody anticipated. There's this famous event in Boone, the 1940 flood, and all the old timers talk about it, right? And all the images and the water lines, and this one surpassed that in so many ways. And I don't think anybody thought we would top the 1940 flood. And so we did as much pre-work as I feel like we could have, but nobody really realized what it was going to be until it was here.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like the public was really not like anticipating anything outside of the normal, bad storm?
Yeah, I think it was just kind of like we'll deal with it, whatever comes. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know many people that got supplies in anticipation. I think our grandparents are probably more prone to go get supplies before a light snow,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Than this, and that's kind of what it felt like to me. And the reckoning with that, and obviously that contributed a lot to the challenges when we didn't have water, right? People were going out and buying water in mass. It was hard to get that, things like that lack of prep. And I don't fault anybody for it. Everybody kind of had a feeling. I will say the really fascinating thing is I was actually in DC for work the Thursday before, and I believe it was Thursday, and they canceled my train back. And I was like, I want to get home before this. I rented a car and full sent it, drove up that night before it, about midnight.
Wow.
The rain was coming down bad. And I remember my dad asked, he was like, "Are you sure you want to go up there? Like, you need to get a hotel room. I don't want you driving." And I told him, I said, "I'll never forgive myself if something bad happens and I'm not there to help in whatever way I can." And so full sent it right up the mountain and got in. And that was kind of, there was a lot of, the interesting thing about Helene was there was rain before kind of the main hurricane came. There's like a day or two of rain that got everything wet. And that was part of the issue, is that we already had a big rain, and then Helene came in. And so I was kind of driving up in that as it was approaching, and could even see coming up the mountain, man, those fields are wet. Man, my driveway looks like it's washing out a bit. Those things, before the brunt of it came. And I think then I realized, man, this is really going to be something.
Yeah. I mean that's got to be really scary, especially for a small town like yours where resources are limited. How did you go about responding to something that catastrophic as a community leader?
Yeah. So, that to kind of give just the narrative, the story. So the first day, everything was down, right?
Yeah.
And it was a weekend, so town offices were closed. Everybody was doing things like swiftwater rescue, and that type of stuff. And I felt like, hey, man, I'm not going to sit in bed. I'm not going to sit at home. I'm going to get out and do something. So I volunteered with some community mutual aid groups, brought water to folks, getting medicine to individuals, checking on the areas that were hardest hit. And it was heart wrenching. Um, and I didn't have the answers. It was a scary thing to do as a local leader, as folks are looking to me, because I didn't have a phone that worked. I
Yeah.
couldn't get in touch with federal representatives. So I was knocking on doors of people that lost everything and saying, look, I'm on the town council. Here's some water. What can I do to help you? And I promise you, I'm going to fight. I don't know the answers right now, but I'm going to fight to get whatever help I can to you. The next day, I finally got in touch with some staff and realized that obviously people are working 14, 16 hours. And we had some staffers that, commuted into town from Eastern Tennessee, right over the state line, or whatever the case were, that were trapped. They could not get in to work in damage assessment. I mean, they were dealing with their own things. And so me and another council member, we actually embedded with the damage assessment team so we could go out in pairs for safety. And from that second day on, I was working 12, 14-hour days with town staff, going out, checking, going into structures to make sure they're safe. And I would come home wiped out, go to bed, and repeat. Still didn't have phone service,
Wow.
still didn't have anything. And leaned a lot on our staff. We had some amazing staff. Our fire chief, Jimmy Isaacs, I'll shout him out if this gets in there. He's navigated so much of this before and has traveled across the state, out to the coast to help. And he was kind of our rock. And we actually hired an emergency response coordinator, Matt Krause. He was excellent. And then our public works team, man, I wrote this article that I wanted to get out, and I feel like this is so Appalachia, but the public works crew, they don't have uniforms like police or firefighters. And a lot of these hotels were like, we'll house any public employee or, a firefighter or a police officer for free. These dudes are sleeping in their cars. They go out, t-shirts with a
Jeez.
shovel, sawing trees, doing whatever. I mean, they were the ones running the water plant and repairing the roads. And I think it's a testament to blue collar work and the way that, we think of the folks in uniform, but we don't think of the folks that are covered in mud. And even when the soon to be governor Josh Stein came up, he was saying, oh, I heard this wonderful story about this police department that came up and relieved y'all's police department. And that's true. It was awesome. And I was like, hey, did you hear about all the public works teams that came up and helped stabilize banks and, were working hard, manual labor he had recognized that, but that was a story that didn't really get out there. That was amazing. But I embedded with the damage assessment team and was working kind of day in and day out on that. And then we had a couple of emergency meetings where we as a town started to grapple with FEMA coordination, work in that vein. And every morning I started at the community disaster response center that was kind of embedded with the county, and had some FEMA representatives there as well.
Yeah, that's a really really great and comprehensive analysis and just rundown of all of that. And I appreciate you going through all of that. I also appreciate you shouting out the public works people because they really are, I think, the unsung heroes when it comes to disaster responses like this. I remember when I lived in Nashville a few years back and talking to one of the people that was high up in the Nashville Metro Water Services agency. And when they had a massive flood in Nashville, I think it was 2010, just the work that they had to do to ensure that things did not turn into a disaster with their entire public works system, and them working around the clock to ensure that things did not go into a complete unmitigated disaster with their drinking water. And like those were things that people did not see, most people didn't know about. But when I talk with those people, because I worked in like flood policy reform stuff, so that's how I learned about all this stuff. It was just fascinating. It's like we really don't appreciate those people enough for the work that they do. When you flush a toilet or when you take a shower, like those people, they're responsible for all these things in our life working the way they do seamlessly and us not even thinking about it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm glad you have that that background. I tell you, the longtime public works director, he always said, Dalton, we know we're doing our job well when nobody's talking about us, and
Exactly.
and it's true. And I was hanging out with this, our community police officer who, is a great dude. And we were actually getting food and bringing it to departments because, people are pretty much eating and living in their offices. And we passed by Public Works guy and he pointed at the dude and he said, those guys really are the rock stars. I mean, even he acknowledged that. Right. And I mean, we got to give love to all our first responders, but man,
Absolutely.
the Public Works team blew me away. And, that story didn't get out there as much.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a village when it comes to something like this, especially as catastrophic as this. It takes everybody, and again, we really take for granted the things in our life that are modern marvels, like plumbing and stuff. That really, when it comes to disasters like this, they may not work one day.
Right.
So when it comes to like the response and having to coordinate with all these different entities, how did you go about managing like your response and coordinating your response with the state and with the federal government, and how did that work, and how effective were those relationships? Because I know that there's been mixed reviews of the state response and of FEMA, and there's been a lot of politicization about it, and it's really hard to sift through the noise and understand what the truth is around that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say just first, you're talking about the noise. You're so right. It was so funny. When I got my internet back and was able to look at news, I was seeing news coverage of Boone that was just untrue. It's like their water plant's destroyed. They will not have drinking water for years. And I'm like,
Jeez.
at the water plant. It's like, what are we doing, guys? So yeah, there's a lot of noise out there. I think the state response, what happened in the General Assembly, there were some bills that they said they were getting folks help and they didn't. And that was a bummer. But our state representative, he was here pretty much every day. I was really impressed with that. And this is somebody that I, have not always agreed with in the past, and we'll give him a ton of respect. He was in the room. He was asking
And
what
who
we
is
needed.
that?
That's a Ray Pickett.
Ray Pickett, okay.
North Carolina House Rep Ray Pickett. He was in the room, man, and I told him that, and I know at points he's been upset with me for some of the things I've said or different opinions I've had of the General Assembly, but and that was the unique thing was we don't typically get along with the county at the town level, but we were all really in lockstep with each other and put a lot of those differences aside. On the FEMA point, and I could talk about this to death, but I was really disappointed to see the national dialogue go into this binary of get rid of FEMA or save FEMA. Like that was the two things. FEMA's perfect and we can't improve it, or we need to get rid of FEMA.
Right.
And the reality is our town couldn't have done so much of that without FEMA and without the reimbursements that will be coming from FEMA. The guy that was in the room in the disaster response, his name was Jake. He was like this ex-military dude, and he was so confident, so good at what he was doing, was there pretty much the day after. He's been let go now because of the craziness in DC.
Jeez,
right. And that's somebody we all had a relationship with. I learned that in our council meeting yesterday. That was made public there. And it's like, man, why do we not have an adult in the room when we're talking about FEMA that can say, hey, the response wasn't as good as it could have been for Western North Carolina. There are still people out there that are being denied help that need it. There are people that are losing their hotel vouchers. I recognize all that, but also FEMA did some good. And how can we improve FEMA and empower federal disaster response to help communities and not have any of the blips, right? Not have any of the problems that they had. But instead, it's what always happens in DC. It's throw the baby out with the bathwater and give it to the states or do this or do that. And there's some real concerns there. And again, regardless of political affiliation, when folks heard they let go that FEMA worker that was there with us really in the trenches and was giving us so much information when we weren't even able to get online, that's a bummer. And it doesn't matter what party you are.
Yeah, it's I wish I could say that it was surprising. It's not at this point because like everything gets politicized, which is how social media works and how politics is. But it is really sad, and like especially when it comes to FEMA, I think FEMA's had a pretty rough history with like how there has been mismanagement in the past. But I think when it comes to something like this, like any federal agency, government's a leaky bucket, especially when it comes to the top federal agency. Things fall through the cracks every single time. And what you have to do is look at it from like a broad perspective of, okay, like you cannot write everything off as a failure. You can't write everything off as a success. And I think that especially in the early days of Helene, when when there was when the floodwaters hadn't even receded yet, indicting different agencies or saying that everything is perfect or not perfect. Like, that was just patently absurd. And I think so many people that were doing that were clout chasing, or God knows what, they were trying to get views on their videos, which was disgusting in its own right. And it just was really disappointing to see that. And I think that, and it was also, of course, it was right around the election time, and so there was that
Right.
whole dynamic thrown into it as well. I mean, did that kind of stuff make your job more difficult?
Definitely. I mean, one of the bummers. I'm saying bummer a lot. There's so many, but uh, one of the one of the real experiences I remember was I was walking through this trailer park that was hit really hard, and telling folks, "Hey, we need to make sure that you get applied to FEMA, make sure that you get the aid, get that 750. But beyond that, right, we need to make sure that you get help." And there was immediately, just a couple of days out, some distrust there, and that was a real eye opener, because this narrative that we were hearing, partly for political clout, oh, FEMA's only giving you 750, and then they're telling you to take a hike, when
Right.
that 750 was designed as temporary money, to then transition into long term, right? Like bigger pots of money made available for folks that need a lot more. And that narrative from leaders and figures that people trusted, I think, encouraged some people not to apply when they could have gotten a lot of relief, right? Because why would I apply? It's just 750. That nuance not being conveyed there, I think, really would have negatively and has negatively impacted a lot of lives. And so that was an issue for sure. I think beyond that, we had the FEMA site needed a police officer there around the clock. So we had to pull emergency personnel off of other relief work to guard the FEMA site, because there were so many threats made against FEMA employees' lives online, right? But you have to be safe, because of some of these rumors that some of these talking heads were spreading about FEMA's going to take your home, or in some cases take the town's charter. There was one of those rumors that was being
Jeez.
pushed around, and not our town, another town, but and how can you do disaster response when that's the case, when the folks that are coming to your door and saying, hey, Chuck, let's get you signed up and get you applied for aid, are being threatened? I mean, it's a political climate that's untenable, and I think it really slowed down the recovery. I mean, they had to pull folks off of the doors. They were canvassing, getting people applied. They had to stop that for a number of days, because there was a guy that showed up a couple of counties over with a gun to a location saying, where's FEMA? I'm trying to handle them. And that's one person. It's all it takes. But there was a lot of people spreading that message, and that was the issue.
God. Yeah, I forgot about that whole $700 thing, and I remember that and how quickly that spread like wildfire, and just how infuriating all of that was, because of how, I mean, how easily that was just packaged into a right wing talking point. And it was right around the election. It was a perfect opportunity for them to do that, and how nefarious it was. And it just goes to show, like, I mean, it's really terrible. And when you look at it, it's like people that are doing that, like they don't care about people, they don't care about public service, they care about power. And that's really, you start to see the real intentions behind people when something as catastrophic as a disaster like this comes out. And I
Right.
think that that's clear. But in that same vein, you start to see the real people that come out, and you start to see people that are real public servants. And I'm wondering if there's some other examples of what you saw in the recovery that really gave you hope, or that gave you, that like inspired you, or that just, filled you with optimism, like saw people in your community coming together, or any type of stories you can share like that.
Yeah, so much hope. I feel I'm so incredibly proud to share this community with the people that I do, and this region. I posted something like that a couple of days before the election. I said, I know it's rare. I'm speechless. I don't really know what this election is going to do, but I have more hope than I ever have for our little spot, right? For Boone and for Watauga County. And it's the honor of my lifetime to share this community with y'all. And whatever uncertainties we navigate from what's going on in DC or Raleigh, I think we can handle it together. That attitude, and I really do feel that way. I mean, I'll share. State Line Resource Center, right on the state line in Tennessee and North Carolina. It was a skate park. They converted over into a resource distribution center in a really rural part of both counties, and that was a lifeline that saved lives out there. And so that was a massive thing. And folks were convening, volunteering. The first couple of days, the amount of volunteers that stepped up, bringing water to places they knew were impacted, tying in with nonprofits. In a college town, typically there's some, I guess, bad feelings with the university sometimes and
Mm-hmm.
some stigma attached to the students. But man, the moment the students got back, they were cleaning parks, showing up, doing whatever they could. Uh, Anybody that was able to kind of get back on their feet metaphorically right after it was out helping. Uh, the resilience of the people was amazing. And then other leaders in Western North Carolina, I'll shout out Preston Blakely, the mayor Fletcher.
Yeah,
I had somebody, he called me and said, I just want to check on you, man. How are you doing? And
it's a good
every
guy.
time, great dude, one of my favorite people. And every time it felt like a Western North Carolina leader was getting an interview, it was, what can we do for Western North Carolina? What can we do for Appalachia? I don't know if I saw a single interview where one of them was like, oh, let's all talk about Boone or let's talk about Fletcher. I mean, it really was this communal thing where we were all sharing our voices, and that was incredible. I'm trying to think of a couple other examples. I mean, Hospitality House is a regional homeless shelter, and they scaled up to a level where they were housing 400 individuals, which was amazing, feeding them as well. The university used their basketball stadium as a Red Cross center. And again, when town gown relationships aren't always the best, they stepped up, right? They provided a place for people. Uh, Churches, man, I mean, all of it. And I, I think I'm still really processing what that was like, and what those couple of days were like without communication and media. I think part of the reason we were so unified was the fact that we didn't have access to that noise. You didn't really talk to anybody that was saying, oh, I'm looking at Twitter about how so and so saying we're doing a bad job or we're doing a good job or FEMA's perfect. I mean, we didn't have that, and we had each other, and that was what was maybe the most amazing thing about it. Was we weren't paying attention to the noise. Everybody saying Boone was underwater was off the mountain, right?
Right.
Everybody was saying Boone was perfect was off the mountain. And so we really could just kind of turn inward and get at it. And there's so many stories out there. I know I met with our mayor and I said, what can we do? Can we get some awards or service tokens or something? Like, I want to go around the town and shake people's hands and say, great job. And the realization is, man, we'd be doing that for the next 2 years, right? So we got to find some other way to recognize folks.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and look, you're better off for it not being online and listening to all the bullshit because it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Because it's just a bunch of losers and grifters, and that's all it is. I can assure you. Uh, so it's been what, close to probably about 6 months now since the storm. Is that right? It was in September, late September.
Yep. Yeah. About 6 months.
Yeah. So looking back 6 months out, what does the recovery look like now, and where do you need to go from here? I mean, how, like, what progress have you made, or has your community made, and what still needs to happen to get Boone and I guess Western North Carolina to a place where you feel like, you're in a good spot like you were before the storm?
Yeah, we still have a long road. The fascinating thing is Boone's recovery in terms of kind of image was pretty quick, right? Our water got back online, our major roads got back online, and in part because of the hard work of public servants. And so I think sometimes people forget about Boone in that process, and they don't realize we're still hurting behind the scenes in a lot of ways, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of other communities that maybe look more, I guess, open, with quotes, because I don't really know the proper word. For us, and I think Western North Carolina generally, we need continued funding from the feds and the state, to small businesses and community organizations that lost those big months. I mean, October is kind of the make it or break it for so many of these mountain towns because of the leaf lookers, right? And that's kind of where they make all their money to support their families and their employees throughout the winter. And they lost that. And so we've seen so many businesses close across Western North Carolina that maybe weren't physically destroyed, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that will not be able to rebuild because they lost their most their most effective month. And so that's a piece of it. I think we need to look at the environmental and the conservation angle. At my day job, I work for this group called the Endangered Species Coalition, and like we need federal protections for some of the wildlife that have been pushed to the brink. The hellbender is a great example, right? The extinction or the Endangered Species Act listing is in review, and like we need some folks to recognize like, hey, if we want to preserve the wildlife of this region, they were hit just as hard, right?
Yeah.
um, and then I think too, it's we still are waiting on FEMA reimbursements, like many other Western North Carolina towns, and federal reimbursements. That government shutdown mess that happened when Elon said the budget's bad, that held us up, right? There was uncertainty there. I don't think people recognize that. And the reality is, we cashed we read a lot of checks and for recovery that we were told will be reimbursed, and we're still waiting to hear back from that. The overtime, the supplies. Most recently in a budget hearing, I talked with the town manager and our fire chief, Jimmy Isaacs. I said, maybe we need to go to DC and talk to our representative and say, look, we're hurting. We need some of this direct funds. But I think those are the major things. And then we still have unhoused people as well. That's obviously major. 200 units were condemned in the town of Boone, and finding transitional housing beyond the hotels, I think, is the next step. Now, we've worked with the state and entities to make sure that we can allow more temporary housing, introduce more of that here. And I'm trying to work with the governor's team on converting this multifamily complex into transitional housing. But like, these folks need some security, and it's tough living in a hotel room. It's tough when you're still seeing the noise about the voucher system. There have been problems there. I recognize that has been one of the biggest issues with FEMA. And so how we can get these folks a little bit more of a stable long-term living situation that have been displaced.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm worried from a federal end that all the dismantling of the federal bureaucracy right now is only going to spell more problems for actually getting reimbursements and getting the funding that you all need, and that Western North Carolina needs, and that all the other communities recovering needs. But hopefully I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong on that, but we'll see.
I hope you are too. I mean, it goes back to that employee from FEMA I talked about, who
Yeah.
who was there day one with us, and now is on leave or laid off. I don't know the exact verbiage or language to use, but the reality is he's not there anymore. And every employee I talked to that was working with him to make sure that their reimbursements were being filed correctly, that they were going to get the support that they needed, the financial support from the feds, has said he was great, and it's devastating to lose him.
Yeah.
And now there's a couple of people that are trying to take on his job as well as their own. And you can imagine the amount of work that these folks are putting in, given every other town in Western North Carolina and county that needs that. And yeah, I hope you're wrong about it too, but it remains to be seen. And I've really been disappointed with some of these moves while folks are still hurting.
Yeah, it's really shameful. Well, it sounds like Boone, North Carolina, open for tourists. It sounds like that's correct.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, come support our businesses. Like I said, we've had a number that have closed their doors, and I mean, do so respectfully. Weston and the county is still hurting, and I always warn against disaster tourism, and I think that's really gross. But come to downtown Boone, come to Boone, go out to eat, walk around the university, and yeah, I mean, we need all the love and help we can get.
Awesome. Well, if there's anything else that we can do or anything that we can direct our listeners and followers to, please let us know. And if there's anything that we can do just in general to help direct people to Western North Carolina, especially during the leaf turning season, we would be happy to help, because we want to help you all out as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's something we'll definitely follow up on. I know a lot of other towns are similar to Boone now, where it's like we need individuals and families and whatever to realize, hey, we're back, and we need the love and we need the support, and also the grace, right? Tip your server well. Be kind, right? If food takes a second, like be gentle too. I think that's so important. Don't just come here and expect to get, the palace tourist treatment. Not that we're going to treat you poorly, right? But like come
Right.
with grace and come with compassion. And I think you'll find a lot of things to love, not just in Boone, but in Western North Carolina, and some folks that I think have a newfound love and commitment to community after what we've been through together.
Absolutely. Well, Dalton, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your story about Western North Carolina, about Boone, and about Hurricane Helene. Again, my heart breaks for you all and your community and what you had to go through. But I'm really inspired by the work that you've done, like the community that it sounds like you have built around Boone, and just like how that community has come together in the face of mass crisis and tragedy. And I wish you all the best. And again, if there's anything that we can do, if there's anything that our listeners and followers can do that aren't local to help you all out, please again just let us know. But again, really appreciate talking to you today, and this has been a really good conversation. I'm glad we were able to sit down and talk.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all the work that y'all do. I think y'all are such a service to this region. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much. Talk soon.
Awesome. Bye.